Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So I sent a note to you, or I think Sean did, last week about this article that I had read about this guy is saying it's a massive scandal at the rating agencies, that they're, based on a Wall Street Journal investigation, finding that there is all this corporate debt that is rated investment grade, but that if there's even a small increase in interest rates, it'll suddenly become junk status. And it's such a large pile that basically it could crash the economy. Am I accurately characterizing that? And tell us what this is all about, what this means, and why the average person should care.
Well, the average person, you're absolutely right, number one, but the average person should care because the last time we allowed this sort of thing to happen, back in 2006, 7, and into 2008, it crashed global capitalism. It led to 4 or 5 million Americans losing their homes, many more losing their jobs, many who have had to go back to work at lower pay, fewer benefits, and all the rest. So the risk to all of us of not paying attention to what we're about to discuss is extreme. So let me explain. Capitalism being the unstable system that it is, after the crash in 2008, the desperate Federal Reserve and the government at that time, first under Bush, then under Obama, took extraordinary steps to try to contain the enormous damage that had already been done from plunging us into a 1930s type of depression. And one of the things they did was to pump massive amounts of money into the economy and to drop interest rates to unprecedented levels, even including minus, that is less than zero, which trillions of dollars are now being lent at around the world, and the United States is part of that. Well, when you drop interest rates to virtually nothing, what you're doing is giving an incentive to every corporation that has a problem. Either it can't sell what it makes, or competitors are squeezing it, or workers are demanding a decent salary, or whatever it is, bad decisions perhaps that the executives have made, there's now an easy out. Go borrow this unprecedentedly cheap money because the interest rate is virtually nothing. As if to prove the point, the explosion of corporate debt over the last 10 years has no parallel in American history. Corporations have been borrowing literally like it's going out of style. And what the article in the Wall Street Journal did was basically say, what is happening to the so-called safety of all these corporate debts? Because when a corporation borrows, it issues something called a corporate bond. The person who lends money to the corporation gets a piece of paper, this corporate bond, which is the guarantee that the corporation will pay back what has been lent to it, plus interest every year according to the deal that was negotiated. So corporations have been loading up because they solve every problem imaginable, including many that should not have been handled that way, by using this cheap money, which they never were able to access before. And what the Wall Street Journal does is say, well, has that been reflected in the credit rating that the company gets? In other words, people who are thinking of buying that company's stock, people who are thinking of lending to the company, people who have small businesses that sell something to that company and want to be sure to get paid, they're all interested in how safe it is to do any kind of business with a company loaded up on debt. And the Wall Street Journal article explains that the rating agencies, that's 3 companies in America dominate that, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. What they have done is not lower the credit rating, despite the fact that their credit rating should have been lowered because these companies are carrying levels of debt, which mean that if we have a downturn or if the Federal Reserve dares to raise interest rates, we're going to see these companies collapse, and with them our economy. So it is, in fact, very scary.
So they've basically built a time bomb under our economy, and in the process of doing so, a small number of senior executives and banks that issue these corporate bonds have made probably hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars.
Absolutely. And here's another way of looking at the irony. Because capitalism crashed, that was the problem. They came up with the solution of very low interest rates, only to discover now, 10 years later, that the quote-unquote solution has made a problem potentially worse than the problem it was the solution for. This is an economy that's spinning out of control when it goes through these kinds of gyrations with the risk it carries for everybody else.
So if the economy were to crash, let's say that, you know, it seems like there's a worldwide recession happening right now. China, you know, is going back to Hong Kong's officially in a recession. Might just be the upset, but who knows? Europe, large chunks of Europe are in recession. If there's a worldwide recession and, you know, not associated with a big deflation, but interest rates go up in the United States, and basically the pin gets pulled out of this hand grenade, to mix my metaphors here, and the U.S. economy goes into a tailspin. When I look at 1932, what I see is the Great Depression taking a bite out of the United States and taking a bite out of Germany. Germany had a leader, or 1933, Germany had a leader, Adolf Hitler, who had one way of solving that problem. The United States had a leader, Franklin Roosevelt, who had another way of solving that problem. I would argue that Donald Trump's solutions are much closer to what Mussolini and Franco and Hitler were using to get out of the Depression than what FDR used, and that this crisis could easily present an existential threat to the United States. This could be Trump's Reichstag fire, particularly if he gets reelected and it happens in the first year of his new presidency. Do you think that I'm like way out on thin ice thinking like that?
No, but let me offer a couple of qualifications. Mr. Hitler at least had the opportunity to say that this colossal mess that he walked into, and remember he takes power in January of 1933, that this mess is older than him and in no way his fault.
Right. Same with FDR.
While that is also in the long run true here, Mr. Trump has taken many steps in his 3.5 years or 3 years to be held accountable. The enormous tax cut to business in December, this crazy trade war with China, which is hurting the United States every bit as much as it's hurting China's economy. I mean, we really have a spectacle in which the world and Americans see that for Mr. Trump to play his card of making America great again by appearing to be Mr. Tough Guy has in fact held hostage the world economy to his reelection campaign. He's under a lot of pressure and blame if this economy tanks. That's why he's putting the kind of pressure on the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, no matter how crazy that is under these circumstances. Capitalism has had an economic downturn every 4 to 7 years. We're overdue for the one that happened last in 2009 because it's more than 4 or 7 years. So the bottom line has to be that Mr. Trump will be held responsible if the crash happens before the election. So I believe his strategy now is to do everything in his power to make the crash happen after the voting is over.
Well, and in fact, here's this just at the very top of the Washington Post 5 minutes ago, big red stripe, breaking news. White House officials and congressional Republicans have begun early talks on a new package of tax reductions and economic growth measures under pressure from President Trump, who is agitating to announce a new tax cut proposal heading into the 2020 election. There you go.
Absolutely. That's it. That's what he wants. And, you know, every economist I know who isn't on Mr. Trump's payroll understands that after a period of growing inequality, the last thing you want is to exacerbate the splits, the divisions, the hostilities in this country with more inequality-boosting tax cuts of the sort he did in 2017. And you don't want to juice an economy already overjuiced by these devices because the old truth will haunt us. The longer you postpone this, the worse the crash will be when it hits. It's just like not going to the doctor when the pain is a little and then being told when you've waited too long that the time for solutions has gone by. You're now going to have to take the bitter medicine. This is playing with absolute fire what is going on now, and that's why that story in the Wall Street Journal alerting us to this crazy, cozy relationship in which the rating companies provide credit ratings to the companies who pay them for the ratings and therefore don't lower them despite the overuse of credit. I mean, it is basically lying to the vast American people, hoping nobody notices until the crash comes when we'll all be running for cover.